Monday. And for more on what we can expect, I'm joined now by my political panel, Victorian Liberal Senator James Paterson in Melbourne and Queensland Labor Senator Murray Watt, who joins us from Brisbane. Gentlemen, good afternoon to you both.
G'day, Liz.
Hi, Liz. Thanks for having us on. Hi, James.
Pleasure.
Hey, Murray.
I want to begin with this news that we've been reporting this morning, that Malcolm Turnbull is due to meet with the Malaysian Prime Minister tomorrow. And among the topics of discussion, we understand, is likely to be a possible asylum seeker resettlement deal with Malaysia. We understand that this is close to being finalised, although it won't be announced at this APEC summit. James, if I can start with you. This, of course, comes just a week after the government announced the resettlement deal with the United States. What's your understanding of this possible agreement with Malaysia?
Well, Liz, I wish I could share with you and your viewers any extra news that isn't already public, but I'm afraid I'm only working on the same information you are, and I'm sure if there's any agreement reached that in due course there'll be an announcement made. But as you say, of course, this follows the conclusion of an agreement with the United States to look at potentially taking asylum seekers from Manus and Nauru and resettling them in the United States, and that's a really positive step. And if there are other workable, manageable solutions that provide people with other countries that they can potentially resettle in, then I think that would be a really positive step too.
Well, we know that the government has been in discussions with other countries besides the US and including Malaysia when it comes to possible resettlement in a third country. But this deal, if it is going to be announced after we've already announced this US resettlement deal, what would be the reasons for that? Is it designed as an insurance, do you think, in case the deal with the US does fall over, or is it about taking some of those refugees who can't be resettled in the United States?
Well, to tell you the truth, Liz, I'm just not sure, and I don't think any of us will be until any potential deal which is being negotiated is announced, and we will have to wait for the details. But as a general principle, I would say that it would be good to have as many options available to asylum seekers on Nauru and Manus. If we're able to provide them with a range of settlement opportunities, that seems like a good initiative to me. But as I say, I can't prejudge a deal which may not even been negotiated yet and certainly hasn't been announced.
But you are aware that it is that this is possibly being spoken about at the meeting tomorrow?
Well, I'm only aware of the same media reports that you are. I haven't spoken to the Prime Minister. He doesn't normally check in with me prior to his meetings with international leaders, so I'll just have to wait, as you and your viewers will, until there's any formal announcement. OK, Murray Watt, Labor obviously came out in support of the US resettlement deal. Will Shorten saying it would be hypocritical not to, given Labor has been calling for the refugees on Manus and Nauru to be resettled in a third country. So if this deal with Malaysia is confirmed, you'd support that, wouldn't you?
Well, again, similar to James, I'm only operating off the rumours that we're seeing in the media. Without a doubt, Labor's priority for some time now has been to push the government to come up with resettlement agreements that would see asylum seekers removed from Nauru and Manus. We think that it's taken far too long, and there hasn't really been any explanation for why the government hasn't been able to come up with resettlement agreements up until now. Certainly we're supportive of the agreement with America to the extent that we have the detail. A Senate hearing that I participated in this weekend raised some doubts about that agreement, and it seems that there's still quite a lot of details to be resolved, and there's still some doubt about how the incoming Trump administration will honour that deal. But nevertheless, we're very supportive of that deal going ahead. And yeah, we've said for some time that we want to see people evacuated from Nauru and Manus as quickly as possible, and we're open to agreements with other countries. I mean, in terms of any possible deal with Malaysia, we obviously find that a little bit interesting that the government has finally decided that it is open to agreements with Malaysia. You might remember when the Gillard government was in power a few years ago, we reached an agreement with the Malaysian government which would have seen people resettled in Malaysia and spared people being put to years of horrific detention in Nauru and Manus, and at the time the Liberals and the Greens voted that deal down. So I'm not quite sure why there's been a change of heart on the part of the Liberal Party. Perhaps James can explain that to us. But, you know, we obviously want to see some detail around any agreement with Malaysia, ensure that people's human rights are going to be respected, ensure that people are going to have a long-term future in Malaysia. But, you know, we are open in general terms to the idea of arrangements being made with other countries to resettle people.
James, there's been some talk that Peter Dutton should be promoted after his role in helping to negotiate the resettlement deal with the United States. Do you think that should be happening, or have you any word as to whether or not he may receive a promotion in light of that?
I'm a huge fan of Peter Dutton's, Liz. I think he's done a terrific job as Immigration Minister. Putting aside his achievements in border protection, let's just focus on the humanitarian dividend which he has delivered in conjunction with his predecessor, Scott Morrison. Together they closed 17 detention centres on the Australian mainland. That's a great thing. They're now providing, and Peter is now providing, an avenue to closing Manus and Nauru. That's a great thing. The 8,000 children who were put in detention cumulatively under the previous Labor government has now ended. There are no children in detention. And of course, the people who were risking, and we know now, losing their lives at sea by trying to come to the Australian mainland on boats have stopped doing so. So purely on the humanitarian metrics, I think Peter Dutton's done a fantastic job, and I'd like to see him utilised in the best way possible by the government, and that judgment rests with the Prime Minister, but he's certainly done a terrific job in immigration.
All right, I want to move on to another issue. The ABCC and registered organisation bill set for debate in the Senate next week. James, just starting with you, we did see Malcolm Turnbull earlier this month say that the bills would be reintroduced to the Senate when he believed a majority of crossbenchers would support it. So is that saying that you are pretty confident of having the numbers to be able to pass these bills?
Well, without getting too much into the intricacies of Senate process, Liz, bills are often introduced sometime prior to when they're actually voted on. There's quite a bit of process that has to go through in the Senate before a bill is actually voted on. There's debate and goes into a committee stage, and amendments can be proposed. So I welcome the fact that they're going to be introduced this week, but I wouldn't necessarily predict that they'll be voted on this week. As the Prime Minister said, I think they'll be voted on when we believe there's a reasonable prospect of them passing. And actually,
do you think they'll get through before the end of the year, though?
Well, I certainly hope they will, but that rests in the hands of the crossbenchers. It is up to them to decide whether they want it to pass before the end of the year. I think there's a compelling case that they should. We've seen just in the last few days another reason why the Registered Organisations Commission is necessary, with a court case proceeding right now against an official in the National Union of Workers for an alleged fraud of up to $400,000, which occurred between, not ancient history, not many years ago, but between 2010 and 2015. So this is yet another union official, another union in recent history which has been alleged to have seriously defrauded union members, and the Registered Organisation Commission will help protect those members from that happening again.
Well, Murray Watt, we know Labor is opposed to this legislation. Only yesterday, though, Bill Shorten was saying that Labor has zero tolerance for corruption in the unions. Why won't Labor support this?
Well, Bill's right. We do have zero tolerance for corruption in any organisations, whether it be employer associations, unions, governments, any kind of organisation where corruption is occurring. Then we think that people should have the book thrown at them. We've got no tolerance for that kind of behaviour whatsoever. But of course, the ABCC and all of the other legislation that goes with it goes far beyond simply dealing with matters of corruption. You know, there's a range of existing laws that apply in Australia that already give police and prosecuting authorities the power to charge and convict people for corruption offences. From time to time, we've seen that happen. But what this bill really is about is just another example of the ideological obsessions of the far right of the Liberal Party infiltrating this government. You know, the fact is that the modern Liberal Party has become so right-wing that they actually don't really see much of a role for unions in the workplace. They ignore the fact that inequality is growing markedly and that unions remain one of the most important organisations that we have in our society to ensure that average working people get a fair day's pay for a fair day's work. And what this bill is really about is trying to cripple unions and remove their ability to provide representation for people in the workplace. The last time we had the ABCC under the last Liberal federal government, we saw productivity in the construction sector go down, and we saw workplace accidents and safety problems go up. This government is always on about saying that the ABCC is a critical economic policy, that it will improve productivity in the construction industry. The facts actually show the opposite. The facts show that the last time this happened, productivity went down, and it was only after the ABCC was gotten rid of by Labor that we started seeing productivity go back up in the construction sector. So, you know, there's no evidence base for this ABCC. It's a pure political obsession.
All right, we'll wait and see what happens over the next 2 weeks. We'll have to leave it there, unfortunately. Gentlemen, we've run out of time. James Paterson and Murray Watt, thanks for your time this afternoon.
Thank you, Liz.
Thanks, Liz. Thanks, James.